Welcome to the Love the Star podcast. I'm Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105.3 The Fan in Dallas, joined as always by former Super Bowl winning NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation, 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday on 105.3 The Fan in Dallas. He is also the pre- and post-game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network. And Brian, we'll talk about the film takeaways here shortly from the Lions game. But before we dive into some Cowboys news and some of the things like that, your overall takeaways from the ceremony of Jimmy Johnson getting inducted into the Ring of Honor.
Yeah, I feel like my time with the Green Bay Packers put him in the into the Ring of Honor, Hall of Fame.
You did
all those things. We never could beat Jimmy Johnson. Tremendous evaluator of talent. I was talking with Chris Hall about him a while back, and you know, one of the things that Chris was always, as a scout, you just love being around coaches that know players, that appreciate the process, that understand what scouts go through, that will listen to a scout, will have his own opinion, won't phone scout. You know, there's a lot of things about Jimmy Johnson that I would have loved to work for Jimmy Johnson. I'm sure there was times he would have been very demanding, to challenge you, but you know, those are all great things. I just think that if you look at those teams that he built along with Jerry Jones and the scouting department here, that it was always a team. It appeared to be a deep team when you played them. They just, you know, whether you tried to stop Emmitt Smith, you know, there's Jay Novacek, there was Michael Irvin, there was Alvin Harper, there was Troy Aikman, there was always, it just shows you how deep. They beat us, you know, with Jason Garrett at quarterback. And, you know, and I mean, I'll never forget Ron Wolf, my boss. We're driving home at the end of the game, and we're on the bus, and he goes, geez, we just got beat by a sandlot quarterback. And, you know, in reality, that just showed you how deep the Dallas Cowboys were. And a lot of that was because of the evaluations of Jimmy Johnson, the staff, and the ability of theirs to build a team that was so difficult to deal with. Just anytime you knew you were playing the Cowboys, whether it was a regular season game or a playoff game, there was good possibility that you were going to fly home that day, probably with a loss. You know, it was only when Jimmy left that they lost that evaluation. Good teams, but they lost that guy that drove the team and was really the primary evaluator and builder and architect of the team. A tremendous honor for him, probably a little bit later than he wanted, but ultimately he got in.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, you talk about the talent on those teams. You know who I always I like to point to when I talk about the talent on the 90s teams? And I understand one or two of these guys aren't even going to be guys that were Jimmy players. But the guys that I always point to whenever somebody says, if somebody were to ask, well, how talented were those Cowboys teams? Just how good were they? I will point to three players for you. Brock Marion, Ron Stone, and Jimmy Smith. Pro Bowlers who had a hell of a time just trying to get on the field to play in front of those guys in the 90s. Brock Marion became a starter a little bit later, but Ron Stone got cut after 2 years. Jimmy Smith couldn't get any work at all on the team. Those are guys who go on to be Pro Bowlers, best players on their team types.
Yeah, I was with Jimmy Smith in Jacksonville, and I will say this about Jimmy Smith. If you said, give me the 10 best, and I'm saying this, I would need to absolutely come up with my 10 best, but if you said, give me your 10 best players you've ever been around in your career, Jimmy Smith would be one of those players. You know, in him and Sterling Sharp, you talk about receivers, and you know that's the kind of player that they had here. And you're absolutely right. The Brock Marion, the Ron Stones, you know, they went on to be really good players for other teams. For the Cowboys, they were just kind of like just in case, and just in case didn't get you on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. A incredibly impressive squad. It's fun every now and then. If you just go back and look at those 92, 93 teams, just look at how many names you know that weren't starting, that ended up having careers elsewhere outside of Dallas. So a great honor for Jimmy Johnson on Saturday night. A great event. That stadium was just as loud as we all anticipated, and the Cowboys got a 20-19 victory, which we'll take a look at some of the takeaways from the film room following that game. Before we do, there are several different developments on the news front. for the Cowboys. The biggest one being that La'el Collins is back. He is signed to the practice squad. He's been out of football for the last several months, but the Cowboys signed him to the practice squad as some offensive line depth. I was starting to wonder. I don't know if you caught the Jerry interview this morning, Brian, but we asked him. We were like, "Hey, you guys looking on the landscape of any offensive line depth or anything?" I was getting a sense something might be stirring there a little bit, Brian, and ultimately it ends up with La'el Collins back there. They also work out Damian Wilson, another former Cowboy player, linebacker, some depth there that he does not get signed, at least not right now.
Right.
And then really quickly, we'll touch on after the La'el Collins stuff, the news that Dalvin Cook is free, because there's a lot of people asking about him.
Yeah, he's not on waivers yet. He's not
right,
on waivers
but
yet,
he'll come up.
Yeah.
I don't anticipate somebody's going to claim him. So we'll talk about just in general the player here in a sec, as well as Isaiah Buggs, who just came through town with the Lions. But before we do that, La'el Collins, interesting move. They obviously had moved on from him from tackle. I think they felt like, I remember at the time asking somebody in the organization, okay, why not kick him inside the guard? Maybe why not do some stuff there? And they felt like he had lost his ability to bend. Which they felt like was really important inside there. And so ultimately, though, I think as a low risk, high reward, he's just taking up a practice squad spot. There's not a lot to dislike about this move. Go ahead, take the gamble in a league that's starved of offensive line depth. Sure, go get me another body to throw out there and see if you can make it work.
Yeah, the biggest questions about him, Bobby, was going to be when they did the workout, what kind of shape was he in? You have to worry about a knee reconstruction. You have to worry about a back that he's dealt with. But we're talking about a practice squad player here right now.
Yep.
We're not talking about a guy that's going to have to make a start against the Commanders or a guy that's going to have to make a start in the first round of the playoffs. There's a lot of love in this organization for La'el Collins.
Your quarterback loves him.
Yeah, the quarterback loves him. You talk to people throughout either scouting, training, equipment. This guy had a lot of people that really, really cared about him as a person and as a player. The thought here is clearly, Will McClay, Stephen Jones, it's about protecting yourself. We went through the whole thing with Tyron Smith being out. Okay?
Yep.
We went through that. Chuma Edoga was dealing with a toe injury. Matt Waletzko is on and Awesome Richards and stuff. The thing that La'el Collins potentially could do is he could start one or two games right now. I mean, you're not asking him to start 16 games now. You're potentially asking him to play one or two games if he had to. That's what you're asking. And, if something happens to Tyron Smith and they don't want to move Tyler Smith. And I was told that the La'el Collins was for tackle reasons and not for guard reasons, not for Tyler Smith.
Which fits what we had heard when he left here, which was they just didn't feel like he had the bend to be able to play guard. Exactly.
So with that being said, could he play right tackle? And could they move Terrence Steele to left tackle if they had to? That's I think playing La'el Collins on the right side is probably the best side for him. But it would give you some flexibility if you wanted to. And this might be more about, again, some Chuma Edoga, that maybe after that Miami game, there's a little bit of doubt about Chuma, maybe a little doubt about him. And so, I just kind of feel like that as a practice squad, this is just kind of a free look. And if all of a sudden something happens, you have now a veteran player that can go in there and can give you some good work, though. Even though he looked a little broken down. Cincinnati looked a little broken down, and towards the end of the Cowboys looked a little broken down. But we'll see. We'll see what kind of shape he's in. I'm sure when we get the opportunity to watch practice and stuff like that, you'll see how he physically looks. I know Patrick Walker, who works at the Star there for DallasCowboys.com, said he saw La'el Collins. He physically looked good, So I think that, I'm just trusting what Patrick Walker's saying because he does live in the building there.
Yeah, and I think, Lyle Collins had probably developed a little bit of a reputation here, I think, with some of the staff by the end of kind of being an it's always something guy.
Yeah.
Like he's always banged up, or there's something going on. You remember there was the suspension issue, which I think really frustrated a lot of people, that he tried to appeal instead of taking his 2 games. Then it ended up being 6. Yeah. And so it ended in some sour taste in their mouths, I think. But again, we're talking about just somebody who's a practice squad player, and you can smooth over a lot of things. Bryce Butler went on First Take and just ripped the coaching staff, and 8 months later was back in the locker room, when they needed receiver help off the street. So you can cover over a lot of sins. They did not sign Damian Wilson, a guy who had been in the building the past couple of years, went off to Kansas City, played a little bit in Carolina last year. He's been out of the league since then. So they did not sign Damian Wilson, linebacker. Now there's a lot of questions. The Jets are moving on from Dalvin Cook at running back. And the Detroit Lions made an interesting move to move on from Isaiah Buggs.
Man, that's surprising.
I thought Buggs looked good on tape when we were studying them leading up to the game.
I had no problem with what was going on at defensive tackle for the Detroit Lions. And maybe this thing with Buggs is that something had to happen, or Dan Campbell is trying to send a message to the players. And man, trust me, I'm going to go back and look at Buggs a little bit closer in that game against the Cowboys. But that's a 330-pound man that moves around pretty good. It's got some sneaky quickness to him, as far as the way you watched him play.
Yeah, you're talking about a guy who consistently was playing 20 to 40 snaps.
Yeah,
and they've got a Lee McNeil coming off of that they're adding to the active roster. But still, something seems a little off there. But Buggs is a guy to consider. We just mentioned him. Like I said, he was somebody who, when I saw him on tape, I thought, like, okay, that guy's.
Yeah, I mean,
he didn't strike me. He wasn't a black hole.
No, it wasn't like usually sometimes you could say, in the game we were talking about, take advantage of Sutton, the cornerback,
Yeah.
Lo and behold, what happened? You go after guys like that. But I didn't feel like the 2 defensive tackles at all coming into this game for the Lions were a liability at all.
And the Dalvin Cook question, we're getting a lot of that. I personally I don't think Dalvin Cook changes your running game very much. The Cowboys running game has had their struggles. Jerry Jones told us on Tuesday morning it is something he is concerned with right now. 3 straight games without 100 yards rushing. That's the first time they've had that happen in a season since 2013. So it's been a while since the Cowboys have had this sort of lack of efficiency. But I don't think that gets fixed just by adding Dalvin Cook here, who's clearly just not the same player he was 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, I went and watched Dalvin Cook before my show today on 105.3 The Fan, the G-Bag Nation. And I go, well, Dalvin Cook will feel right at home if he comes here, just watching the way that the Jets were run blocking for him. It seemed like to me it was, we always say in the scouting world it's tough sledding, and it was some seriously tough sledding for Dalvin Cook. I just don't think he has the juice and the burst that he once had. I know I watched him a little bit at Minnesota. I mean, he had a really good game against Dallas last year, where it's 6 yards a carry, 6.5 yards a carry in that blowout win that the Cowboys had. He's had some really productive games. The Jets didn't give him the ball a whole hell of a lot. He could still catch the ball very, very well. That's something he could do, as we say, well. Blitz pickup stuff, he's just not very good at that. He's not. And right now, to be honest with you, Tony Pollard, you can say what you want about Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard is one of the best pass blockers you got.
Which is hilarious because Tony Pollard was one of the worst blitz pickup guys in the league a few years ago.
My guy is, if you look at the pass that Dak Prescott threw for 21 yards to Cooks, Tony Pollard gave his body up to get that ball completed. I mean, Dallas inside was struggling with the twist. All kinds of things were going wrong. Martin, everybody was having problems. And what did Tony Pollard do? He stepped up and just launched himself into the middle of all that.
Yeah.
And it's from the theory of, if they got to run over you, then it's probably going to take them some time to get to the quarterback. And he did. He sacrificed himself in order to get that ball off. And it was a huge play in the game. And Tony Pollard has become a legitimate weapon as a blitz pickup guy and as a blocker. They need to get him more involved catching the football. Last year he was averaging almost 9-10 yards a catch, and now he's down to 5. The screen that they threw to Deuce Vaughn. Deuce Vaughn took the ball inside. Deuce, you got to stay outside. Your blocking was all to the outside. Go down the sidelines. You get a block downfield. You went back inside, and then Zach Martin, that's where he was blocking his guy. So, it's a nice gain, but Tony Pollard needs to be the one getting those screen plays and stuff. And by the way, the pass they ran, that Texas route where you go up and then inside like that, the angle route, I guess they would call it too. He got his helmet ripped off, basically. He's literally looking at his ear hole trying to catch the ball, and the officials didn't call that at all. So kind of a tough day of running, but Tony Pollard, give him some helmet stickers for some legitimately outstanding blocks.
Well, let's get into that Lions film and what was put on tape there in the Cowboys in that 20-19 victory, where there were still some questions about the Cowboys in terms of the details and the little things and how much those things could potentially cost them in a playoff game versus how much they actually have improved some of that and are prepared now, as it looks like they are in line to take the number 2 seed in the NFC with a victory over Washington this weekend. Don't take anything for granted, of course.
No,
obviously.
Hell no.
You are listening to the Love the Star.
I'm sorry, Bob. Go ahead. Do the tag.
No, not gonna. Go ahead.
No, do the tag. Seriously.
You are listening to the Love the Star podcast. The Love the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, now hit me with it. What you got? What you got for me?
Well, the thing about it is, though, with this, it's just, to me, the whole thing about the people who follow me on Twitter, and I thank every one of them. I appreciate that. I answered a question about which team you wouldn't want to play, and I brought up the Rams. So now my timeline's full of like, oh, you're scared, you're a P word, you're all this stuff. I'm just answering the questions, folks. I really am. If folks are nice enough to ask me a question, I try and answer the question. But, there's nothing given about going to, because there's 2 things here with the Commanders, and we'll get into it. One, Ron Rivera, this is probably his last game ever coaching. Seriously. Yeah. This is probably his last game. Do I worry about a situation where we saw with Lovie Smith last year in Houston in that final game that they played, where clearly if they lose the game, they have the number 1 pick, and what do? They win the game and they get the 2nd overall pick. If you're Commanders ownership and you desperately need a quarterback and you're sitting with the 2nd pick right now, if you win this game, maybe you drop down a little further and then you don't get the quarterback that you absolutely want. So I would be, if I'm ownership, I'd have to be very mindful of saying, listen, Ron, we need to not win this game. But you can't do that because this is likely going to be Ron Rivera's last game of coaching in the National Football League. I don't see Ron Rivera, like saddling up and taking a DC job somewhere. Well, maybe he would, but I just don't. So he's going to go out and try and win this game. It's an opponent that absolutely, has given you problems in the past. The Commanders, we're going to get
the last 2 years have been rough visits there for Dak Prescott.
Yes. So to me, I'm not sitting here. It would be horrific if the Cowboys had a chance to get the 2nd overall seed and they go and flop against the Commanders.
Yep.
But you know what? The way that Dallas has played on the road, you mentioned the attention to detail or lack of at times. The way that they get, the penalties, spotty play, unfortunately fumble the ball out of the back of the end zone, throw an interception late on the outside. There's just things that don't always jive. And I'm not going to sit there and act like, oh, well, Commanders are a 13-point dog in this game. This is going to be a tough game. It really is. I'm expecting a very, very physical game from the Commanders.
When we talk about the Cowboys and we'll get into specifics here on the film, what you saw against the Lions. But I was talking about this on 105 through the Fan on Tuesday morning, and I'm curious if you subscribe to this thought. To me, the Cowboys have in terms of just talent across the board, the Cowboys are a top 5 roster in the NFL. Like they're one of the more talented, well-balanced teams in the NFL. Yes. The problem, I think, is that when it comes to being a disciplined football team, a team that's really detail-oriented, I think they're probably in the bottom 3rd in the NFL. They are one of the worst detail-oriented teams I've seen in the league this year. And my question is that just sloppiness? Is that something where you kind of are what you are and you're just going to have to pray that in these playoff games you're not getting into a lot of late close game situations where those details can burn you? Or is that something that you think reasonably, hey, they might be able to clean up some of this down the stretch?
I hope they can clean it up, but you're very fortunate you didn't lose that game the other day. And they ran the 2-point play, and fortunately it was a penalty. Then what do? You back them up, and the first thing you do is dive into the neutral zone. And you pressure. There's incomplete interception there, and you're like, damn, that should have ended it right there. So, they've got to do better. They've got to do better on those details for sure.
So, Brian, coming out of this game, it was a 20-19 victory for the Cowboys, and it's a game where after a lot of discussion about CeeDee Lamb and how much he was involved and how much he was targeted, he became a focal point once again. Had an absolutely fantastic game, broke Michael Irvin's record for receptions in a season, franchise record for receptions in a season, and the franchise record for receiving yards in a season. He was really good in this game. Defensively, I thought that the big stars coming out of this one were Jordan Lewis, Donovan Wilson, and Demarcus Lawrence. I thought they made a big impact for you. What stood out for you in this game specifically, good or bad, from the Cowboys?
Yeah, we mentioned the blocking from Tony Pollard. I think that helped a lot in the game, in the overall game, because it was going to be important because of the way the Lions like to blitz secondary guys and then also their linebackers. So great job by Tony helping out there. CeeDee Lamb, that was a playoff football game, and that just shows you what the game plan needs to be. If 17 passes need to go towards CeeDee Lamb every game in order for you to win, throw 17 balls to CeeDee Lamb. Just do it. The quarterback, he and the quarterback had that rapport. Just go ahead and do it. I felt like, though, that teams are starting to try and take Jake Ferguson out of the game. They're taking him out of the game by treating him like a wide receiver. Sometimes you're going to see nickel corners go play him in certain down and distance situations, I believe.
Yeah, he's not going to surprise defenses anymore.
No, not anymore. That's so, Ferguson, and you're asking me about guys that played well, though. Lamb, of course, Dak. I mean, I think there's some throws that Dak would absolutely love to have back. The interception he had was a reckless throw. It was just a reckless throw.
Yeah, he was trying to make something happen.
He was trying to make something happen. He made something happen in the 92-yard pass. It's amazing how he was able to keep his balance after the hit, get outside the pocket, keep the eyes down the field, and then Lamb to win all the way down the field. He did. But the pass, the second down pass at the end of the game, I guarantee you, if it's Tolbert running, Tolbert's running the deep end, and it's past the sticks, it's going to be a first down. But Dak launches it down to Cooks, but Cooks is short down there, so they don't get the full route. But I think if it was Lamb running the in instead of Tolbert, I think Dak probably throws that ball and it's game over. The tripping call was horrible. It kind of set you back that way. But defensively, you mentioned it. Lewis was outstanding. The interception was a special play on his part to stay at home, reading the back. Montgomery's coming his direction.
It was a high IQ play.
Boom. And all of a sudden, Oso Digizua gets pressure up the middle. The ball, and Goff just turns and wheels and throws it left. Well, there's Lewis. He's seen it. He read the play. He's driving. He makes the interception. Great job. Tank Lawrence, I can't tell you how many times it was Tank, just his awareness of what the situation is and what the blockers might be doing to him. I think it's incredible. I think there's some gambling going on the goal line that he pulled off. Two guys, him and Clark, both go through the same gap, and when he probably should have gone the other way, but he went behind Glasgow, the guard, because he felt like that he was going to overplay him. He overplayed him. He went back door. Him and Clark go through the same gap. That's usually a recipe for disaster. But anyway, they make it work. Negative plays. That's Tank. They go unbalanced line. They don't block him at all. What does he do? -4. That's what you got to have to win these games. And Tank is that guy. Short yardage, goal line, tight goal line. It doesn't matter. He has this awareness about him to make those plays. So outstanding job by him playing in that football game.
It's funny. I heard Greg Ellis talked one time about how that 07 playoff game against the Giants that they lost, that the middle eight, they were getting down near the end of the first half, and the Giants were driving and they were getting ready to score. And Greg Ellis just said that he was sitting there the whole time going like, I got to make a play. Yeah. Like he said, he just heard Mike Zimmer and Dave Campo, the years of coaching, just reverberate in his ear of like, you need to make a play right here because you cannot let them score.
Right.
And how he felt like if we stop them, which the Giants did score there, I think they kicked a field goal. Greg Ellis felt like that they turned the game there with them scoring at the end of the first half. Yeah. And that's something where he thought like, I got to make a play. And he came up short. And he said that's one of his big regrets is that he didn't make a play on that drive that he really wanted to. I bring that up to say, I feel like Demarcus Lawrence is the guy that in those situations where it's like, got to make a play, Demarcus Lawrence is going to make the play every single time. He will. It's not going to be on each single snap, but if there is a drive, if there's a big drive to be had, Demarcus Lawrence is going to flash at least once on that drive. He's going to come up big for you.
No, he is. He is really good on twist stunts. He's really good playing the run. He's got special awareness and instincts and the ability to read the blockers in front of him. That whether they're tipping back, rocking back in their stance for a pass, they got all their weight on their hand, their feet are different. He studies the game. He studies these blockers. Like I say, that play that he made when he goes backdoor in Glasgow, the guard, I guarantee you, I think I'm 95% right. He was supposed to go front side and take on and shoot that gap, and he saw an opportunity to play backdoor and get to the ball quicker by letting Glasgow go past him. And then now he's backdoor, and now he's in on the play. That's just so. I mean, in that situation, you're gambling to make a play, and if you're wrong, it's probably going to kill you. But more times than not, his gambles pay off. I've seen him play edge and slant all the way down like into the B gap to go and just straight shoot a gap.
His instincts are fantastic.
It's incredible. Like he understands, and this is what we're talking about, these Cowboy linebackers. When in the Sean Lees and the Dat Wins and the Dexter Coakleys and these guys and that ability, Leighton Vander Esch, that ability to see formation and understand ball's going right there or ball's going over here and then getting over there and making a negative play. I remember a game against Philadelphia, Sean Lee made a ball, they threw a screen to the outside to Westbrook and Sean Lee makes a tackle for -5 and it knocks Philadelphia out of field goal range. Those are the kinds of plays that you got to have to win games like you did against Detroit and going forward when, you get into the first round, second round and on.
Big victory, certainly not without its warts over the Detroit Lions, but a big victory nonetheless. And now puts you in a position after the Cardinals take care of the Eagles for you to, beat the Commanders and take this number 2 seed and not have to see the San Francisco 49ers until the NFC title game and get the opportunity for somebody else to potentially knock them off. A great series of events, a fortunate turn of events here for the Cowboys in the schedule late in the season. You are listening to the Love the Star podcast. The Love the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is now time for our Dean Julia Love of the Star mailbag. We're going to turn things over to our dear sweet listeners, get their thoughts, their questions, their comments, their concerns. First one from Alan Harrison. The defense has been playing good, but it's getting torched on the last drives for 2 games in a row. Is there anything to it? Any long-term concern with seeing them break at the very end?
They didn't get pressure on that final drive against the Lions. They did a couple of different things, Alan. They went into a situation where when you play, there was 141 left in the game, I believe at the time.
Yep.
They did something it was probably too early to do. Now, first off, Dallas, once they got that interception on defense, they probably didn't think they were going to have to go back out there. They were probably thinking, this one's over. Oh, let's take a breath. And now they get put back out there with a minute 41 left in the game. All right, Quinn comes out, and we've seen this at training camp, Bobby, where he guards the sidelines. No timeouts, guard the sidelines. Okay, so you have drop, then widen to guard. So now you got guys along the sidelines to
Don't
make
let him
sure.
get him
don't
out
let
of
him get out
bounds.
of bounds. Don't let him get out of bounds. Okay, at 141, that's a long time. I can understand if like what the situation Arizona was in yesterday against Philadelphia, where they had 20 something seconds left and no timeouts. That's when you play funnel defense. And I think Dan went to it a little early. So it's the first play. They get a huge chunk, 10-yard play down the middle of the field there. So now it's, okay, well, let's not do that. Bad idea. So they come back. What do they do the next time then? They get a situation where they play cover 2, and then both safeties are on the numbers, not on the hash, on the numbers. Mm-hmm. So you got a defense that is stretched horizontally, and then you've got, what do you got? The tight end goes up, peels aside, boom, ball right there. Now it's another chunk play. Now you're thinking like, okay, so what does Dan do the next time? Well, they get in a situation where they need to kind of take care of the crossing routes. Okay, they play with a robber. They play like a cover 2 and then drop the safety into the middle area there and try and take care of things. Okay, well, they get a ball knocked down there, a little bit better situation. Still have no pass rush the whole time. Still no pass rush here. And then they all of a sudden they say, okay, well, we'll play curse on Laporta. Laporta shakes him, gets him, go outside, gets his weight, outside foot, breaks inside, boom, ball inside, big play there again. So now you're in real trouble. You've given up some plays. There's been some spikes. They're down there, and then they throw the ball out in the flat to St. Brown, and they had coverage problems with Gilmore, and those guys over there in the secondary were all kind of struggling with where they needed to be. Yeah. Ball gets in the end zone. He tried 3 different things on that drive to slow down Detroit. None of them worked. And a lot of that had to do with you were pressuring Goff the whole game. Pressure. Not on that drive. And, I think he went a little early to the sideline guard. He got burned on the 2 wide safeties. He got beat on putting curse on Laporta. There was a lot of things that I think that he probably learned that he doesn't need to do anymore that way.
Next question here from John.
Sorry,
we've talked about.
Answer
no, that was good. We've talked recently about the Mazi Smith weight loss and where he's at now, which they got him playing rather svelte. Brian, John wants to know, what position are they grooming Mazi for next year? Is this a case where they're just getting him ready to play 3 technique instead of 1?
I don't know. I really don't know. I know he looks small on tape, and that's why I asked somebody. And now it's
I don't think you have him. I don't think you have him drop realistically.
No.
This is just, I'm throwing out my own number here, 30. I don't think you have him drop 30 pounds if you plan on him being a pure 1.
I think he's dropped close to 40.
I think he has too. I'm just trying to be generous there. But I don't think you have him drop 30 unless you're trying to have him play quicker and get upfield and play more of a.
Well, that's the whole thing. They're trying to get him to play quicker, but he's got to learn to play quicker off the snap. He's got to learn.
Yeah, it feels like instincts more than weight.
Yes, it does. But yeah, he might be in a situation too where they were trying to play him next to, they've got Osa that plays really well at the 3. But, you drafted Mazi Smith to be a 329-pound or 325-pound 1 technique.
Space eater.
He's not that anymore. He's not even an eater, It's impressive how much weight he's lost. But for him to lose all that weight, he's not the player that you drafted from Michigan. It's just that's not the same guy. But if it's to make him play faster and all that, I understand. But I don't think I would have done that this season. I would have kind of waited to the offseason, and maybe they feel like that him playing at a lighter weight will help him be a better player in the future. He was a pretty good player at Michigan. I'm interested to see where this is going. But to answer the question, at 293 pounds or so, I'd say he's probably working to him playing a 3 technique. That would be what I think they're grooming him for.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're talking about making him that light, there's clearly you're trying to get him to be quicker up the field rather than try and eat space in the gaps and keep linebackers clean. Next question here from Clint Baldwin. He wants to know about he thinks we're really missing George Edwards right now on the coaching staff, and I saw a couple different questions about the linebackers coaches. Any long-term concern for you about the linebacker group? Do you think they're missing the George Edwards that George Edwards decision was one that's hurting them a little bit now?
I love George. George and I were together on when I was in Dallas in the early 2000s, and I've always had the utmost respect for George. I think George was really surprised that he got let go. George got caught in a prisoner for prisoner swap is what
I was going to say, I think Dan Quinn was surprised he got let go.
Yeah, I think that to me, and I don't think I'm saying anything that's a secret, you had some guys that, Jerry Jones is, okay, what does Rob Davis do here? Oh, okay. I don't think I want to do this with Rob Davis anymore. Well, what did Mike McCarthy counter? Well, I don't want Leon Lett around anymore, Well, what about this guy? How about the line coach? I don't know about having this line coach here. Well, if you don't want the line coach around here, I'll just take George and I'll skip Pete and whoever else, I think there was a lot of
Pissing contest.
I think there was some prisoner for prisoner. I'm probably way wrong, but it just seemed like to me, Jerry lost some guys and Mike McCarthy lost some guys. And, Scott McCurley is, coaching the running backs. That's kind of a shock. My guy who was coaching the
Jeff Blasco's coaching the running backs.
I'm sorry, McCurley coaching the linebackers. I'm sorry. Thanks for catching that, Bob. Yeah, but
which I do want to give one thing to Scott McCurley. He has not had the linebacker personnel he thought he was going to have.
No, hell no. I'm trying to give the guy. Yeah, I'm trying to give.
Yeah, they've been very depleted. He planned on having Leighton Vander Esch and DeMarvion Overshown in his group.
Yes, he did, and it's not it's not his fault, but it's just it's funny that McCarthy. I mean, he had a bunch of these guys that kind of got demoted, and then all of a sudden it turned into we're starting to move away from guys, and all those guys got elevated again. So that's it is. But McCurley has not, to his credit, he's done the best he can with playing with those hybrid players the way they have.
Last question here from Casey. We already know you've got a little bit of concern with the Los Angeles Rams, Brian.
I do.
But what is your ideal week one matchup for the Cowboys in the playoffs? So if these teams, to me, it's obvious. I would love it if the Vikings could sneak in there and get you the 7 seed because I'd like to go
Vikings with no quarterback. Yeah.
Yeah, no quarterback. TJ Hawkinson's gone.
Yes.
Justin Jefferson's been banged up a lot of this year.
Yes.
But which, by the way, I think Kevin O'Connell deserves a ton of credit for even having that team competitive right now.
Yeah.
With all the losses that they've taken. But give me the Vikings. Outside of the Vikings, if you're telling me the realistic options are going to be Seahawks, Rams, Packers, out of those teams, probably the Packers, I think, is who I want to see.
I would go. I don't want to deal with Seattle. And here you say this, and now people's going to call you a P word and all this stuff.
My most favorable matchup is Green Bay, is what I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, to me, playing Green Bay seems like with no Aaron Rodgers, I'll take my chances. Now they
Jordan Love's been really good the last several weeks.
He has. You've got to kind of figure out, you're going to Mike McCarthy probably will overthink that game, it'll be one of those deals. But I think if I had to handicap it, I'd go Green Bay. I would then go Seattle, and I think the Rams. People are like, oh, the Rams almost got beat by the Giants. Go back and watch the Rams play the Ravens, and you tell me if there's anybody this year, maybe the exception of Cleveland, that's played the Ravens as good as the Rams played them.
Yeah, should have beat them.
This is like 3 weeks ago. This ain't no week 4 or week 2. This is at the end of the year. Rams flew all the way across the country and played a 1:00 game in Baltimore, and were a punt return away from walking out of that bank place with a victory.
M&T Bank.
Yeah, I'm glad you knew the name. But that's what I'm saying. Everybody's like, oh, the Rams, well, they almost lost to the Giants. Go watch them play the Ravens.
It's a different football team right now.
Circle back after you talk. Yeah, you want to deal with Puka Nacua and those guys. And everybody say, yeah, we whipped them pretty good when we played them the first time. They were missing some cats. That running back Williams, he wasn't playing. You know,
Different football team.
That guy, he's like 120, 130 yard rusher a game. And then those receivers and stuff. Okay, fine. Play that. Just tell me all about how bad the Rams are. I get it. Yeah.
That does it for us here today on the Love the Star podcast.
We will be,
No, not at all. This is scrappy, Brian. We need more of that. We will have a preview of the Commanders, also a look ahead to any of these moves that could be coming down the pike for the Cowboys. Obviously, they've got Lyle Collins. We'll see if they make any other decisions now as some of these players begin to clear waivers. But for Brian Broaddus, I'm Bobby Belt. We will talk to you guys again later. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.